Hi, everybody. Tyler Trumbauer with Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection as we are with you as we're getting set for another episode of our week-long podcast series here in honor of National Fire Prevention Week. We thank you all who have tuned in for each of our previous episodes. If you've missed any of them, be sure to check them out on our YouTube channel. Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection is how you can find us here. And today we have another great episode with another tremendous guest who is going to give us their perspective on what they see from their role in the fire and life safety industry. And today we are honored to join by Dan Finnegan, the manager of industry affairs for Siemens. And he's got a interesting kind of perspective comparative to all the other guests that we have, kind of from a manufacturer and one of our partners, and really what they do kind of globally as well in this industry, in addition to locally here in the greater Lehigh Valley area. Dan, thank you for your time today, and we appreciate you giving us a few minutes.
Well, Tyler, first, thank you very much for your efforts between yourself and Kistler O'Brien to put on this important podcast series, because, you know, this is what it's all about, is this awareness and communication of just how important fire safety is in our lives today. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as I go through our session here today.
Appreciate that. No, thank you. And that means a lot. And it's something that we're looking forward to help bring awareness and celebration here to National Fire Prevention Week. And then obviously the month, as some people do. But we hope that, you know, this maybe brings more people to give, the attention to fire and life safety for the other 51 weeks in a given calendar year. So, Dan, let's start off a little bit and learn a little bit more about you. About yourself, your career in fire protection. How did you end up at Siemens? If you could kind of give us a little bit of background.
Certainly, I always enjoy talking about myself. You know, I am one of my favorite subjects. No, only joking, of course. I've really been blessed, Tyler. I got my start in the fire life safety industry back in the 1970s. Yes, that was 1970s. I was in the fire service for 10 years in the 1970s in the Chicagoland area. Started out as a paid-on-call firefighter, but the department was growing, and I became the first full-time firefighter. And we had a fire chief. Now, granted, this is, the early 70s. We had a fire chief that saw the value in fire prevention, and he actually had me start as the first full-time fire prevention officer. So I was doing fire inspections back in the mid-70s when we really didn't have the codes that we have today. And it was an interesting evolution. Fire sprinklers were not required in most buildings. Fire alarm systems certainly weren't. But I was blessed to be able to spend that 10 years and watch the code start to evolve. Back then, by the way, just for reference, we'll talk about some numbers later, there was probably close to 12 to 15,000 people a year were dying in fires back in the 60s and going into the 70s. And then after that 10-year mark, not quite sure what the inspiration was, but I took a leave of absence from the fire service and joined, I'll call it the commercial side of fire protection. I had an offer, and I went to work as the branch manager for the company known as Pyrotronics back in the 1970s, which, as we all know, I think in this audience, Pyrotronics became Cerberus Pyrotronics, which became Siemens. So in 1985, my career started at Pyrotronics in the Chicagoland area as managing their branch office. And I just had a blessed career managing regional director worlds through the evolution of that. Pyrotronics product line was always the same, and it's now continued to mature as we've gone forward into the Siemens smart infrastructure world. But for the past 12 years is when I consider the highlights of my career. I was offered the position of this manager of industry affairs, which is really managing of the codes and standards that, as we all know, drives our business. The fire safety business is unique in the fact that what we do is driven by codes and standards. So I'm involved with managing 77 different fire codes and standards developments. Those are in NFPA, UL, also the IBC and the IFC. And I have a team of 33 people within Siemens that work with me. They do that in addition to their full-time jobs. This is my full-time job. And we make sure we sit on all the technical committees, help advance the codes in the right direction so that we continue to save lives, protect property and support the mission of the businesses of many in the audience out here. So that's where my evolution and career has been at this point in time, is still managing this code and standards arena. And I certainly have lots of other cool things to talk about that as we go through with your interview, Tyler.
Awesome, Dan. Well, thank you for that background. And obviously, you're kind of the perfect person for this podcast series with your years of experience and in different roles and different areas. So we appreciate your time once again. And kind of let's dive into more about Siemens as a company. You know, they work in multitude of industries. You can go down different avenues if you just visit Siemens' website and see what they do. But how important is fire and life safety work done by Siemens? How important is it to them? And what exactly does your company do in this space?
Sure, Tyler. Thank you for the question. And I'm not going to make this a commercial about Siemens because that's not really the important message here. I really want to spend most of our time in a couple moments talking about fire prevention and the steps we need to take. But Siemens, of course, is a very large global electronic, energy, and medical field. We cover everything from circuit breakers to switch gear to in your hospitals, the MRI machines that you see. In buildings, it's the building HVAC systems, it's the security systems, and of course, the fire alarm emergency communication systems. We are in a group within Siemens known as Siemens Smart Infrastructure, and that contains fire life safety, it contains security, building automation, and energy management in that environment. And, you know, specifically in our fire group, we actually design and manufacture early warning fire detection life safety systems and emergency communication systems for all hazards. And you might note I've used some words there specifically because we are in the life safety industry beyond just the fire safety industry, and we're actually also dealing with all hazards today. We have gone beyond the wait for the fire truck and wait for the fire to start. We're doing so many more things. As I know, Kistler O'Brien is very active in all aspects of life safety and certainly of work on all hazards. But we do cover small buildings, medium buildings, large complex buildings. You know, we're also put a very high level of importance on the migration of existing systems. As you can see, my 35, 36 years here at Siemens, we've installed a lot of systems. And I don't think to date we've ever told a customer that sorry, we don't make that anymore, you got to replace it. We have a migration path where the customer can use that existing core conduit wire and they can upgrade the head end, they can upgrade devices, can be done over a period of time. And we're very proud of that because it's a very cost-effective way of maintaining fire life safety in your buildings. And last but not least, we also have a fire suppression offering in which we offer clean agents and other agents in that very specialized but important area of fire suppression. That's it.
Great to hear. No, and obviously a lot of crucial offerings and great partnership for those individuals and customers that need those life safety and fire safety equipment. So kind of talking about fire protection equipment there a little bit and life safety. And, this is the area you said you really wanted to dive into. How crucial is the proper fire protection equipment to life safety? Not just having it, but having it that fits your needs of that business, that building. But how important is it for overall life safety and mitigating loss in the event that there is a fire emergency?
Sure, Tyler. Now, once again, another excellent question. When you start to think about it, we are the absolute front line of defense in a building, whether it's a school, hospital, nursing home, your own individual single family home. We are that first line of defense and oftentimes the offense also. We're defending plus providing positive action for people to take. We clearly detect fire at the earliest stage possible. We provide notification to the occupants of what needs to be done in regards to evacuation or relocation. We're the ones that notify the fire department early to let them know to start responding before the flames are breaking out the windows or through the roof. We're letting them know that the fire is in an incipient stage. Maybe the fire sprinkler system has gone off, maybe it hasn't, and they're on their way of responding. And then we also, with the information we provide in our systems today, we provide a good guide to first responders for them to take the right course of action in order to save lives. In 1982, when at that time it was known as pyrotronics, introduced the first addressable fire alarm system, that was a game changer. We went from being able to tell a fire department what room a fire is in versus before all they knew is what floor a fire was on. And in today's world, that addressability is still there, and it's even gone beyond that, as we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. But the key aspect of our systems is to save lives, in both the lives of the building occupants and also to save the lives of our first responders. Yep.
Certainly, and taking that a step further now, you have the equipment, it's in place, but there's not just the end of the road there. You have inspections, maintenance, compliance, etc. And those are sometimes things that fall through the cracks. Folks may think no news is good news. It's not making noise. There's no alert. There's no emergency symbols going on the screen. But why is it just as important to follow up and go through that checklist of getting proper inspection and maintenance and make sure you're in compliance as code changes? How important is that? And if just as important as getting the right equipment in step one?
Right. Yeah, it's an excellent point because, that first step when you're dealing with the design has to be done properly. The installation needs to be done properly, training of the building occupants, but then it all kind of goes into automatic mode after that. And the key factor here is our systems, the systems that your firm, Kistler O'Brien, installs to protect the buildings and occupants within your community. It has to work right the first time. We don't get a second chance in life safety. We don't get an extra chance to say, well, I'll try it again. We have to operate correctly, as programmed, as designed, the minute that fire occurs, because we know today how rapid a fire can build in today's environment with synthetic materials and all the combustible stuff that we put into our buildings today. It's more important than ever that these things work right the first time. And, proper testing and maintenance is code driven. Well, I mean, it's a have to be compliance with NFPA 72, the right code book here to make sure that you're complying with the proper frequency and methodology. And it really does need to become the highest important in a building manager's budget and stuff. But you know what? We have a challenge that we've created for ourselves. In a little while, I'll give you some stats on where we're at with fire deaths and fire growth over the years. But the fact of the matter is we've done a very good job of preventing fires, of detecting fires early, and reducing the number of fire deaths and sometimes the number of fires that are occurring in buildings. So people are getting complacent. They're not having the fires. They're not seeing them on TV like we used to. Because, one of the numbers you'll hear again shortly is in commercial buildings, which is where Kistler O'Brien and most of the Siemens systems go into. Last year in 2019, the fire death was only about 119 people. 119 people. What we should be doing is celebrating that, Tyler. We should be making a big point out of that because, believe me, it was in the thousands and thousands years ago. But because it isn't the thing that gets most attention, it's building owners, building managers, and others become complacent. So it's really up to us, the fire life safety industry spokespeople, yourself, your organization, by doing what you're doing with these podcasts, to get out and communicate the importance of these things working right the first time. And also I'm finding, when we have a situation where these things work right, and they do, we need to make sure we enunciate that a little bit instead of sweeping it under the carpet and saying, well, it just did its job. It's topics of podcasts when acceptable. It's topics for social media, but it definitely needs to be echoed through our organizations and the builder and the building owners organization who had that fire, because sometimes they don't even know that they had a fire in an electrical room, but it was detected early, maybe suppressed, it was put out, and there was little damage. But 20, 30 years ago, that probably would have wiped out an entire floor, that fire, because it was not detected early. So, that's probably the key thing we need. And I know Kistler O'Brien does a great job of this. We need to be maintaining, testing, inspecting, and doing the right things for our fire safety systems, because once again, they have to work right the first time.
Agreed, sir, and very good points there. So talking about that technology and how it's grown leaps and bounds over the years, you've seen it firsthand in your career. What are some of the latest technologies that you see that could help even further fire protection efforts and maybe get that number of 119 down even more?
Sure. Yeah, no, and there are a couple of interesting things occurring. One that's been talked about for a year or two now are the changes that Underwriters Laboratories is doing to the sensitivity of smoke detection. Effective June now of 2021, all smoke detection and smoke alarms in our homes are going to have to respond to synthetically based fires much faster than what we are currently doing with today's technology. So they're going to be faster. But we're also going to improve the resistance to the unwanted phenomenon sometimes caused in the cooking arena. Cooking gases, cooking fumes have been activating these things. So, the results of the changes that are occurring, that there's been a lot of enunciation about, will result in more stable systems and, more importantly, faster systems. Just that brief note, we used to have in our homes as much as 15 to 20 minutes to escape when a fire was detected and the fire started before we can get out. Today, because back then we built our homes with wood and cotton and natural fibers, that's when you had 15 to 20 minutes. Now, with the fact that we use almost all synthetics, which are petroleum-based, yes, that's gasoline-based products that make up our furniture, our carpeting, and the stuff that we put in our homes, that escape time has dropped down to 3 to 5 minutes. So it's become very critical. It's a big deal of early warning detection. And that's why UL in the industry made these changes that I've just talked about on the detection side. Another piece that's coming up is this idea of isolation. Siemens has rolled out the fact that in all their products going forward, we will have built-in isolation. What does that really mean? The simple answer is your cost of installations are going to be reduced, because instead of having to add a separate isolation module, it's all built into the same detection device or monitoring device. And that's a good thing because it helps reduce costs. Because you know what? That is owner sensitive. Keeping these things affordable is an important thing that Siemens sees going forward. And of course, it's also going to improve their reliability. We can get into the topic of isolation on another topic of discussion. It gets a little involved, but the fact of the matter is it keeps the systems reliable. But the next really cool thing, Tyler, that's coming up, I like to call the remote world that fire alarms and life safety systems are going. We all are sitting here going, oh, look at what my home security system can do. Look at what I can do to, home automation. Everything is on my phone. Fire alarm systems are still kind of the red box on the wall that you better not touch. Well, all that is now changing. We have now put into the next edition of NFPA 72, which will be out in a couple of years, the ability to have remote access. And this is two-way communication now into the fire alarm systems for remote diagnostics, for software downloads, and to provide you awareness on your phone of everything that's going on with that fire alarm system. It's a giant step forward. And yes, wow, yeah, we're monitoring cybersecurity concerns. We're taking care of all that. But this is a giant step forward into that arena. Today, Cerberus Portal is already available to Kistler O'Brien and our VAP, our distribution team, which is the first step, because that's cloud-based awareness at your terminal monitor within your building office of the status of all your systems throughout your installed market area. Big step forward, all cloud-based. Yes, it's one way now. You are just hearing from the building. But you know what? Two-way communication is definitely going to be there sometime in the future, because that's what you're going to want. It's what your customers are going to want. You're going to want to have that ability to be able to say, hey, you know what? There's a light on the panel. Instead of having to send a technician out there, you just look at you get right on the computer, you go right inside that panel, and you find out what's going on. And sometimes you might even be able to correct it remotely, not as much as you'll be able to have somebody respond with the right solution, the right piece part, whatever's necessary to do. Or you tell the owner, hey, you know what? You got a tamper valve out there. Looks like somebody tried closing it, or maybe somebody bumped it. Have somebody go out and take a look at it. It's just going to make fire protection and life safety that much more reliable as we go forward. There's another remote too. And some of your customers, some of the areas listening to this podcast may be seeing it already. And it's under remote testing. Now, remote testing is a new standard has been formed, NFPA 915, by that's going to be titled Remote Testing of Fire Protection Systems. And it is intended, first phase, to allow the fire code official to sit here in the office just like I'm doing, and then you, Kistler O'Brien, go out with your technicians with a iPhone, iPad, turn the video on, and you're going to show that inspector the functioning and the operation of the system you installed while he sits in his office. That won't be done for probably large systems, but it's being done today already when there's great distances that need to be traveled in some remote areas. When it's a small recheck of a system, it's just keeping people more efficient and more effective. Eventually, though, someday that will probably evolve into remote testing of the actual system. But right now, it's the remote inspection of the system is really what's being done. They're going to be allowed in the code. And I say that, but there's probably 3 or 4 states that are already doing this by local ordinance for reasons that I've mentioned before. So all of this stuff that we mentioned in the 3 remotes is the foundation for smart buildings, which we know are coming. Internet of Things, everything is smart around us, and life safety is going to be a major part of that. And that's one of Siemens' key drivers. And we know the entire industry is going that way. Because you know what? If we don't get on board with this, we're going to be left behind because the buildings are going smart. They are going with that level of intelligence. Yep.
That's a great look into the future to see what's on the horizon, and sounds like a lot of great things and technological advances as well. And you mentioned the word remote, and I feel like that word has been used probably more in 2020 than ever before. And this is a topic that I've touched on every podcast thus far, and that's COVID-19. And it seems like no matter what industry, what job specifics you have, COVID-19 has impacted it in some way, shape, or form. In what ways, if any, have you seen, or you have heard about, et cetera, from colleagues that COVID-19 has impacted the fire protection industry from your view?
Tyler, you hit it right on the head. It's affected and impacted all of our lives in the way we work, we play, we think, and we operate. I can tell you this from my world of codes and standards. I used to be on the road every week, attending a technical meeting, a trade show, doing something. Well, since March, I haven't been on an airplane. But you know what? We have been very productive because we're doing all our meetings in this environment on Teams or Zoom or some method. NFPA, we did all the NFPA 72 technical meetings. They're doing NFPA 70. This is the way of the future. You know what? They're productive. We're getting things done. Companies are saving a lot of money, and it's just going to be the way to go. This whole idea of working remotely and doing business remotely is now become part of our mainstay. But, the one challenge that COVID-19 has given that needs to be addressed and focused on is many owners, especially initially, have said, "Thou shalt not come in my building and do my inspection." Well, a couple moments ago, we just talked about how important it was to keep your system tested, maintained, and so on. So we have to watch this. Now, things are starting to lessen up a little bit, and there's certainly more acceptance as long as our inspection teams with Kistler O'Brien and others go in with the right PPE and the rest. But, we just need to keep an eye on that, importance of doing the safety, preventive maintenance work cannot slip. And Siemens itself, too, has been very responsive in this world of COVID. When this thing first came upon us back in March, Siemens jumped on. Built a number of those temporary hospitals that you saw on TV, the stuff in New York City and others, where we turned stadiums into beds of 5,000 people. And with that, we actually created temporary/portable fire detection, alarm, notification systems, and the like to make sure all those people were being safe. So, it's part of what Siemens' ability to react is, being the large corporation they are. When somebody needs and cries for help, we're able to react as needed.
Great, and that's good to hear that Siemens was able to step up in that time of need when, especially early on in the coronavirus pandemic, first hit the United States. And very good point as well. And that's something that we've stressed from Kistler O'Brien in our social media outreach over the past couple of months is that life safety cannot take a back seat. There's a lot of things on business owners' minds, with the gathering restrictions and just trying to fight through the pandemic and increased costs for themselves from PPE perspective. But we always stress that you cannot let fire and life safety take a backseat. And, we have done our part with our technicians to keep them safe and to keep our customers safe while they're on a work site as well. So obviously, Dan, this podcast and all of them this week, this entire series is in honor of National Fire Prevention Week and a holy National Fire Prevention Month. Folks celebrated throughout the month of October, specifically this opening week, and something that you and we focus on it the other 51 weeks of the year. However, not everybody does that. So for you, for someone that's been in this industry for decades in a variety of roles, what does this week and month and this overall, kind of celebration and focus on fire prevention mean to you? And in what ways do you feel that it is so significant and important that we have this time allotted each calendar year?
Thanks, Tyler. Yes, this is by far my favorite time of the year. It's kind of like Christmas week for me. Fire Prevention Week this year, of course, falls between October 4th and October 10th. But you're right, celebrating the month or recognizing the month is an important thing to do. And I always look to NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. They have been the drivers of this program ever since it was acclaimed by national proclamation many years ago to recognize this week. And this year, it's serve up fire safety in the kitchen is the motto and the driving message. And why is that? It's because kitchen fires are the #1 cause of home fires. We're going to see in a couple minutes that also equals the largest number of deaths. And that unattended cooking in those kitchen fires is the #1 cause of those things. So, these are things we can probably do something about with awareness and with actions being taken. And, I also look at it too, as I'm calling you from the greater Chicago area. I live out here near Buffalo Grove, our North American headquarters, Illinois. And of course, the Fire Prevention Week at its core was focused on the Great Chicago Fire that happened on October 8th of 1871. That fire killed over 300 residents of the city of Chicago, left 100,000 homeless, and destroyed virtually almost the entire city, minus the water tower, which if those who still come to visit the city of Chicago on Michigan Avenue can see the original water tower building, one of the few buildings that survived the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. But to my friends in Wisconsin, there was even a bigger fire at the same time up in the woodlands of Wisconsin that killed even more people. But for some reason, the city of Chicago is getting the focus on this, and it's just where Fire Prevention Week was built around. So, let's just talk about the numbers for a second, because there's an interesting story here that ties in with fire prevention. The 2019 stats for fire deaths has been released by NFPA. And a summary kind of goes like this. First of all, fire deaths were up by 1%, 2019 over 2018. 1% maybe doable. But the structure fire deaths in there were a total of 3,700 total deaths in 2019 of fires. But it's interesting to see that structure fires were 2,900 of those. But of those structure fires, 2,390 or almost 2,400 were in our single family home. So that single family home is still where the death problem is today. And, multifamily, that's your condo apartment buildings, 380 people there. Commercial buildings, I talked about this earlier, just 110 people died. And there's 110 miscellaneous that drifts off into other areas. But, the number we're proud of right now, though, and it's also a proudness and to some degree a concern with, is if you take a look at today's fire deaths in 2019, compare it back to 1980, we have reduced fire deaths by 61%. So everyone should be celebrating that. 61% of fire death rate has been reduced by. And why is that? That's because in the 70s, we introduced smoke detection. Wasn't out before. Codes required it. We had real fire codes that required fire sprinklers, building construction, means of egress, exit doors that swing out, all those things we learned with all those disastrous fires. We haven't had a school death since Our Lady of Angels fire in the 1950s. All these things were lessons learned and lessons reacted to through codes, the enforcement of our codes, and more importantly, too, by the operational excellence of our fire service. they're a different breed today. They really know what they're doing, and they know how to save people's lives. But it goes back to the statement I made a little while ago about complacency, because you know what? People in commercial buildings think it's not going to happen here. I'm not going to have a problem. And that even people in their homes really feel that it's not going to happen to me. And some other stats will tell you that almost every American will experience almost 1.7% of fires. In other words, they'll have a fire 1.7% of the time in their life. So almost everybody has some level of fire experience. I myself personally did when I was growing up, so I'm part of that stat, and that's where we're headed from there. So I think it's just important that we see this value, that every year we take time to pause. We know we're getting good media attention, live side-by-side fire demonstrations by many of the fire departments. The local fire department is taking a step forward and having open houses and things of that nature. But Tyler, what you're doing here at Kistler O'Brien is really the best. I mean, you're putting out professional podcast communications. It's going to get out through the entire network of all the public and allow people to pause and think about the importance of making sure their smoke alarms in their house are working. Consider putting in home fire sprinklers if they're building a new home, and just to be fire safe, putting fire safety at the top of the table.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. And I appreciate all the insights and information that you have brought today. The statistics were a great touch and very informative, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you. And we really appreciate you being a part of this week-long podcast series with us to help shed some light on fire and life safety. Thanks again.
Always here. Be safe. Happy Fire Prevention Week. Thanks.
Thank you. And that, once again, ladies and gentlemen, was Dan Finnegan, Manager of Industry Affairs at Siemens, here for another episode of our Kistler O'Brien National Fire Prevention Week video podcast series. We thank you all for tuning in, and we encourage you to check out our YouTube page, Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection, to see all of this week's podcast episodes. Until next time, for Kistler O'Brien Fire Protection, I'm Tyler Trumbauer. We'll talk to you then.